hall was alive with excitement, filled with the sound of whispers, soft footsteps, and the occasional clearing of throats. A sea of well-dressed people sat in velvet chairs, their eyes shining with anticipation. Many had come to see the young, confident performers who had already gained a reputation for their skill. Among them, almost invisible, was a woman who carried a quiet presence. She moved carefully, as if she were afraid that any sudden sound might shatter her nerves. She had always loved the piano. From a young age, she had spent hours practicing, her fingers dancing over the keys in the solitude of her small home. Music was her refuge, a place where she could pour her feelings without fear of judgment. But today was different. Today, she would be in front of a large audience and a respected maestro who had seen countless performers. The thought made her heart race. As she waited backstage, she watched others with a mix of admiration and unease. The performers were confident, smiling, waving to friends, and basking in the attention they received. Some had fancy dresses, some had stylish suits, and all carried themselves with a charm that drew the eyes of everyone around. She, on the other hand, wore a simple dress, her hair neatly tied back, and she did not have anyone cheering her on from the audience. She felt small, almost invisible, and a shiver of doubt ran through her. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of thoughts in her mind. "I am ready," she whispered to herself, though her voice barely carried in the empty space backstage. She reminded herself of all the hours she had spent learning, of all the sacrifices, of all the quiet nights spent perfecting each note. She told herself that her love for music was enough to carry her forward, even if no one noticed her now. The chatter of the audience reached her ears as she stepped closer to the edge of the stage. A few performers had already played, and the crowd had applauded enthusiastically for them. She felt a pang of envy but quickly pushed it aside. Her journey was different. Her music was her story, not theirs. She reminded herself that attention could be fleeting, but passion and dedication were enduring. Backstage, she took a moment to adjust the piano bench. Her hands hovered over the keys for a brief second, feeling the familiar texture that had always comforted her. The piano was not just an instrument. It was a companion, a friend that had shared her joys and sorrows. She closed her eyes for a moment and imagined the notes flowing smoothly, her fingers moving with confidence and grace. The stage lights glimmered as she stepped onto the wooden floor. The audience barely noticed her arrival. A few polite nods came from those in the front rows, but most eyes were still on the performers who had already captured the spotlight. She felt the weight of being overlooked, but instead of breaking her spirit, it strengthened her resolve. She knew that her music had the power to speak for her, even if she did not have a voice loud enough to demand attention. She sat down at the piano and positioned her hands gently over the keys. The hall fell into a quiet hush, the kind that carried a subtle tension, as if the audience was waiting for something extraordinary. She allowed herself a small, calming breath and then pressed the first key. The sound was soft, almost fragile, but it was hers. It carried her story, her emotions, and her years of dedication. As she played, the melody began to grow, flowing from her fingertips with increasing confidence. The notes filled the hall, weaving a tapestry of sound that was both delicate and powerful. Some in the audience shifted in their seats, surprised by the richness of the music. A few exchanged glances, their eyebrows raised in curiosity. Slowly, the quiet whispers began to fade, replaced by attentive silence. She did not notice the change in the room. She was lost in the music, each note a reflection of her inner world. Her fingers moved effortlessly, guided by years of practice and an unspoken connection with the piano. Every chord, every gentle touch of the keys, told a story of patience, perseverance, and deep emotion. Backstage, a few organizers who had initially overlooked her began to pay attention. They leaned forward, ears straining to catch the sound that had begun to captivate the room. Even the maestro, who had seen countless performers, raised his head and listened intently, sensing the exceptional quality in the music. His expression shifted from mild disinterest to surprise, and then to admiration, though he did not yet reveal it. Time seemed to slow for her as she continued. Each note was deliberate, each pause meaningful. She did not play for recognition or applause. She played because she could not imagine doing anything else. Music was her life, and in this moment it was the only language that mattered. The audience, once distracted by other performers, began to lean forward in their seats. Eyes that had been wandering were now fixed on her. Some held their breath, captivated by the elegance and depth of her performance. It was not just skill that held them, but the emotion that poured from every note. The music spoke of hope, struggle, and quiet strength, and it reached everyone who listened. Backstage, a quiet murmur spread among the assistants and organizers. "Who is she?" someone whispered. They had not expected such depth from someone who had seemed so modest and unassuming. The realization began to sink in. This woman, who had been overlooked and underestimated, had the power to command attention through her art. Despite the growing recognition, she remained focused on the piano. The world outside the music faded. All that existed was the harmony of notes, the resonance of each chord, and the connection between her heart and the keys. She allowed herself to feel every emotion, translating it into sound. Every moment of doubt she had felt was transformed into expression, leaving the audience in awe, even if they did not yet know her name. As the final notes lingered in the air, a silence followed, profound and complete. The hall seemed to hold its breath, reluctant to break the spell she had woven. And then, slowly, the first applause began. It started as a soft clapping from a few in the front rows, but it quickly grew, swelling into a standing ovation. The sound was warm and genuine, a recognition not just of skill, but of heart and authenticity. She rose from the piano, a gentle smile on her face. There was no arrogance, no demand for attention, just a quiet acknowledgement that she had shared something real. The maestro, who had remained seated, now stood and approached, his eyes wide with admiration. He offered a nod of respect, a silent gesture that spoke volumes more than words ever could. In that moment, she realized something important. Being overlooked had not been a failure, but a preparation. It had allowed her to focus on the music itself, to pour her true self into every note. The applause, the recognition, and the admiration were not the goal. They were the natural consequence of passion and dedication. As she stepped off the stage, she felt a sense of peace. The anxiety, the fear, and the doubt that had accompanied her that day were gone. In their place was a quiet pride, a recognition that she had done what she loved with honesty and courage. And in the hearts of those who had listened, a lasting impression remained. A modest woman, once overlooked, had shared a melody that would not be forgotten. Backstage, after her performance, she felt a mixture of relief and disbelief. The applause had been overwhelming, yet she did not allow herself to linger on it. She knew that this was just the beginning, and there was more to come. The other performers, who had been confident and flashy, now watched her with curiosity and a hint of respect. Some whispered to one another, unable to hide their surprise that someone so modest could play with such depth and skill. She walked slowly through the hallway behind the stage, her hands lightly brushing along the walls for support. Her heart still raced, but it was no longer from fear. It was excitement mixed with a quiet pride. Even though she had always played in private, she realized that her music could touch people in a way she had never imagined. It was a strange and beautiful feeling to be acknowledged without asking for it, to be seen for what she could do rather than for appearances. As she passed a group of performers, one of them hesitated before speaking. "Your music, it was incredible," they said softly. Their voice carried genuine awe. Others nodded in agreement, and some even looked a little embarrassed, realizing that they had underestimated her. She offered a gentle smile, nodding politely, but she did not linger to accept praise. It was not attention that she sought, but a quiet understanding that her effort had mattered. Back in a small waiting area, she found a corner and sat down, letting herself relax for the first time that day. The room was filled with people talking, laughing, and sharing stories of their own performances. She listened quietly, absorbing their experiences but never feeling the need to compete. She understood that her music was not a contest. It was a personal journey, and the joy came from expressing herself fully. A few minutes later, one of the event organizers approached her, clipboard in hand. Their expression had shifted from mild indifference to respectful curiosity. "Would you be willing to meet the maestro?" they asked. She paused, surprised. Meeting him had never been part of her plan. She had never expected such recognition. Still, she nodded, not out of ambition but because she felt it was the right moment. Walking toward the main hall, she noticed how differently people now looked at her. Their eyes no longer skimmed past her as if she were invisible. Some offered polite smiles, others whispered among themselves, and a few stared with obvious admiration. The realization that she had made an impression was both humbling and slightly disorienting. She had always believed that talent alone could speak, but seeing it reflected in others' reactions was a new experience. When she reached the maestro, he was seated, reviewing notes for the next performer. As she approached, he looked up and held out a hand in greeting. There was no arrogance in his expression, only genuine curiosity and respect. She shook his hand, feeling a mixture of nervousness and honor. "Your performance, it was remarkable," he said simply. "I have seen many pianists, but what you played was different. It had soul." She felt a quiet warmth at his words. Praise from someone of his stature was significant, but she did not let it inflate her sense of self. Instead, she responded with modesty. "Thank you. I just play what I feel. That is all." Her honesty seemed to resonate with him, and a small smile appeared on his face. "That is why it is so powerful," he replied. The conversation was brief, but it left a lasting impression. She walked away feeling both grounded and uplifted. The recognition she had received was not the end goal, but it was a meaningful affirmation that her efforts had been worthwhile. As she returned to the waiting area, she noticed that the energy in the room had shifted. People were no longer focused solely on flashy performances. There was now an appreciation for depth, authenticity, and emotion. While waiting for the next segment of the recital, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the countless hours spent practicing in a small, quiet room, the sacrifices of missing social gatherings, and the endless patience required to master even the smallest passages of music. All of it had led to this moment, and it reminded her that persistence and passion often go unnoticed until they meet the right audience. As she looked around, she saw a few young musicians who seemed nervous and unsure of themselves. She could see a reflection of her own earlier doubts in their eyes. She quietly offered them a reassuring nod, a simple gesture that spoke volumes more than words could. She wanted them to know that talent and dedication mattered, even if recognition was not immediate. Meanwhile, the organizers were discussing the schedule for the rest of the evening. They paused occasionally to glance at her, clearly impressed by her earlier performance. A few whispered suggestions that she be considered for additional opportunities in the future. It was a testament to how quickly perceptions could change when someone proved their skill and authenticity. The audience, still buzzing from her performance, began to discuss her quietly in small groups. Some described the technical mastery of her playing, while others spoke of the emotion and soul that seemed to pour from every note. Her music had reached beyond mere entertainment. It had created a connection, an unspoken understanding that lingered in the hearts of those who had listened. As she prepared for the next round, she felt a sense of calm determination. She knew that being overlooked in the past had been a test of patience and character. Today, she had been recognized not for appearances or charm, but for the truth of her talent and the depth of her expression. It was a lesson that would remain with her long after the recital ended. Her focus shifted to the piano again, adjusting the bench and gently placing her fingers on the keys. She felt the familiar comfort of the instrument beneath her touch. This was where she belonged, not in the shadows of others, but in the music itself. The audience could wait, the applause could wait. For now, all that mattered was the next note, the next melody, and the next moment of connection. The hall quieted once more as the next performers took their places. She observed them silently, not comparing herself, but appreciating the effort and courage it took to perform. Each person had their own story, their own struggles, and their own unique way of expressing music. She felt a renewed sense of respect for all musicians, knowing that behind every performance lay countless hours of dedication and sacrifice. A young organizer approached her again, this time with a small notebook. "The maestro asked me to write down some of your details," they said. "He wants to follow your progress and perhaps invite you to other performances." She nodded quietly, feeling a mix of surprise and gratitude. It was an opportunity she had never imagined, yet she remained humble. She understood that the real reward was the ability to continue doing what she loved, not the recognition itself. As the evening continued, she remained calm and composed. Her presence was no longer invisible, but she did not let it change her. She moved through the hall with quiet dignity, acknowledging those who spoke to her with warmth, but never seeking attention. Her modesty and authenticity became part of her charm, and people were drawn to her not just for her music, but for the genuine humility she displayed. Later, during a brief intermission, she found a quiet spot to sit and reflect. The emotions of the day swirled in her mind. Nervousness, doubt, relief, excitement, and a growing sense of confidence. She realized that being overlooked had not been a curse, but a preparation. It had allowed her to focus on what truly mattered, to nurture her talent in private, and to be ready when the moment arrived. She also thought about the young musicians who had been watching her closely. She hoped that her story would inspire them to continue practicing, to remain patient, and to believe in themselves even when recognition seemed distant. Talent alone was not enough. It was the combination of dedication, passion, and humility that made a lasting impression. As the recital resumed, she returned to her seat, listening attentively to the performances around her. She felt a quiet sense of belonging, not because she had received applause, but because she knew that she had earned her place through effort and sincerity. The hall was filled with music, each performance unique, and she appreciated every note for what it represented: courage, perseverance, and love for the art. Throughout the evening, she remained a figure of quiet strength. People began to notice her more, not just for her talent, but for the way she carried herself. She did not need to boast or draw attention. Her music and her modesty spoke louder than words ever could. It was a reminder that true excellence often shines through without seeking the spotlight. As the final performances concluded, she left the stage area with a sense of fulfillment. She had faced the fear of being overlooked, transformed it into determination, and shared her gift with an audience that would not forget it. The respect and admiration she had received were meaningful, but they were secondary to the joy of playing and the connection she had created through music. That night, as she walked home quietly, the memories of the recital played in her mind like a gentle melody. She thought about the faces of the audience, the reactions of the maestro, and the whispers of fellow performers. She realized that being overlooked was never a measure of her worth. What mattered was the honesty of her music, the courage to perform despite doubt, and the humility to remain true to herself. And with that understanding, she knew that she had only just begun her journey. The next morning, she woke up early, sunlight streaming gently through the window. Her body was tired from the long day, but her mind was still buzzing with excitement and reflection. She remembered every moment of the previous day, from the first timid notes to the final applause. It was a night that would stay with her forever, a night where her quiet dedication had been seen and felt. She sat at the small table in her kitchen, sipping tea, and allowed herself to relive the experience. Each memory brought a small smile to her face, a warmth that spread through her chest. She knew that her journey as a musician was far from over, and that recognition, while unexpected, came with a responsibility. People had seen her talent, and she felt a quiet determination to continue sharing it with honesty and grace. Outside, the world carried on as usual. Neighbors walked their dogs, children played in the streets, and shopkeepers began their morning routines. To them, she was just another woman, quiet and unassuming. Yet, inside, She carried the echo of applause and the knowledge that her music had touched hearts the night before. It was a private joy, a reminder that what truly mattered was not the outside world, but the love and effort she put into her art. Later that day, she returned to the piano. The instrument sat in the corner of her modest living room, familiar and welcoming. She ran her fingers over the keys gently, feeling the smooth surface beneath her touch. There was comfort in the routine, in the quiet moments where she could play without expectation or pressure. Her mind wandered back to the faces in the audience, the reactions that had surprised her, and the maestro's expression of respect. She let those thoughts inspire her fingers, and the melody flowed naturally. As she played, she reflected on her life before the recital. She had always been passionate about music, but often felt overlooked and underestimated. Friends and family had supported her in small ways, yet they never fully understood the depth of her dedication. For years, she had played in private, pouring her soul into each note without seeking recognition. The recital had been a test, an opportunity to show herself and others that her talent was real. And now, having passed that test, she felt both relief and a renewed sense of purpose. Word of her performance began to spread. A few acquaintances mentioned the recital in passing, their voices tinged with surprise and admiration. Some colleagues from her daily life approached her with questions, wanting to know more about the woman who had played with such depth and feeling. She answered politely but without exaggeration, emphasizing the importance of practice, patience, and passion over recognition or fame. Her humility was evident, and those who spoke with her were drawn not just to her music, but to her gentle presence and authenticity. A few days later, an invitation arrived. The maestro had personally requested her presence at a private session, a chance to explore her abilities further. She opened the envelope carefully, her hands trembling slightly. The letter was formal but encouraging, praising her performance and suggesting that she had potential that could be nurtured for more public opportunities. She felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. It was a chance to learn from one of the best, yet it also meant stepping into a new world she had never imagined for herself. The day of the session arrived. She dressed simply, choosing comfort over style, and carried with her only her music and her determination. The studio was elegant, filled with the scent of polished wood and the quiet hum of instruments. The maestro greeted her warmly, his eyes reflecting curiosity and respect. He had arranged for a few other students to be present, talented musicians eager to learn and be challenged. She observed them quietly, feeling no need to compete. Her goal was not to prove herself to them, but to grow in her own way. The session began with warm-ups and technical exercises. She followed instructions carefully, her fingers moving with precision and control. The maestro watched closely, offering occasional guidance, but he allowed her to express herself freely. There was a balance of discipline and freedom, a combination that suited her perfectly. She felt herself stretching, both technically and emotionally, discovering new ways to bring music to life. As the session progressed, the maestro asked her to play a piece of her choice. She selected a composition she had been practicing for months, one that required both skill and sensitivity. As her fingers danced over the keys, the room seemed to quiet, the other students and even the maestro captivated by the depth of her expression. The notes were not just correct, they were alive, full of emotion and understanding. Each phrase told a story, each pause carried weight. When she finished, the room remained silent for a moment, as if holding its breath. Then the maestro spoke, his voice full of admiration. "Your playing is remarkable. You have not only mastered the technique, but you understand the heart of the music. That is rare." She felt a quiet pride, but it was mixed with humility. She knew that there was always more to learn, always room to grow, and she was eager to continue her journey. Over the next few weeks, she attended more sessions, learning, practicing, and refining her skill. She encountered challenges, moments of frustration, and times when she doubted herself. Yet, each difficulty became a lesson, a chance to improve and deepen her understanding of music. The maestro guided her patiently, praising her efforts while pushing her to explore new dimensions of expression. The sessions became a rhythm in her life, a source of inspiration and fulfillment. Outside of the lessons, she continued her daily routine, playing quietly in her home, reflecting on her progress, and observing the world around her. She noticed the small joys in life, the sunlight through the trees, the laughter of children, the quiet moments of solitude. These moments, she realized, informed her music just as much as technique and practice. Emotion and experience were the soul of her playing, and she embraced them fully. Word of her growing talent began to reach a wider audience. Invitations for recitals and small performances arrived, each one an opportunity to share her music with new listeners. She approached each with the same humility and focus that had defined her first recital. She played not for fame, but to connect, to convey emotion, and to honor the art she loved. Audiences responded with warmth and admiration, yet she remained grounded, aware that her journey was ongoing. One evening, after a particularly moving performance, she walked home slowly, the cool night air brushing against her face. She thought about the path she had taken, from private practice in her small home to recognition by the Maestro and a growing audience. She realized that being overlooked in the past had shaped her in profound ways. It had taught her patience, resilience, and the value of humility. More than anything, it had allowed her to focus on the essence of music: expression, emotion, and connection. She returned home, sat at her piano, and played for herself. There was no audience, no expectation, just the familiar comfort of the keys beneath her fingers. She played with abandon, allowing every note to reflect her thoughts and feelings. The music filled the room, a private celebration of growth, dedication, and the joy of creation. In those quiet moments, she understood something essential. Recognition and applause were meaningful, but they were not the goal. The true reward lay in the journey itself, in the hours of practice, the small triumphs, the lessons learned from mistakes, and the deep satisfaction of expressing oneself fully. She felt gratitude for every moment that had led her here, including the times she had been overlooked, the doubts she had faced, and the quiet determination that had carried her forward. As the night wore on, she closed her eyes, letting the music linger in the air. She thought about the future, about the opportunities yet to come, and about the countless melodies still waiting to be played. She knew that the path of a musician was never easy, but it was a path she loved, a path that had given her purpose, connection, and a voice. She felt ready for whatever lay ahead, confident in her ability to face challenges, embrace growth, and continue sharing her music with the world. Weeks passed, and her life began to change in quiet but meaningful ways. Invitations to perform at small gatherings and cultural events started arriving. She accepted some and politely declined others, choosing carefully where she felt her music could be truly appreciated. Each performance became an opportunity not just to play, but to connect, to share emotions and stories through her melodies. On the day of one particular event, she arrived early, carrying only her music sheets and a small bag with essentials. The venue was a cozy hall, smaller than the grand recital hall she had first played in, but warm and welcoming. People were already arriving, chatting softly, finding their seats, and sipping tea or coffee. She noticed familiar faces, some who had attended previous recitals and others who were there out of curiosity, eager to hear the modest woman whose music had touched so many hearts. As she waited backstage, she reflected on her journey. She thought about the first time she had been overlooked, the nervousness she had felt, and the incredible shift that had occurred when she allowed her music to speak. Every memory was a reminder of how perseverance and dedication could open doors, even when recognition was slow to come. She took a deep breath, feeling the familiar mixture of excitement and nerves. When it was her turn, she walked onto the small stage quietly, nodding to the audience. Unlike before, there was no overwhelming applause, only a respectful silence. She smiled softly and sat at the piano. The keys felt familiar beneath her fingers, comforting and steady. She allowed herself a moment to close her eyes and gather her thoughts before beginning. The first notes were gentle, almost hesitant, but as she continued, her confidence grew. The music flowed naturally, each phrase carrying emotion, telling a story without words. She played not to impress, but to express, letting the melodies convey what her heart felt. The audience listened intently, drawn in by the depth and authenticity of her performance. Some leaned forward, captivated, while others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Backstage, a few of the organizers peeked in, surprised by the quiet power of her performance. They had expected a modest presentation, perhaps soft and unassuming, but instead, they witnessed a musician who commanded attention through skill, emotion, and presence. Even those who had been skeptical of her talent could not deny the impact she was having on the listeners. She continued to play, her fingers moving with grace and precision. Each note was deliberate, each pause meaningful. The music seemed to breathe, rising and falling with emotion, guiding the audience through a journey of hope, reflection, and quiet strength. She could feel the connection forming, a silent understanding between herself and everyone listening. As the final notes lingered in the air, the room remained still for a moment. Then slowly applause began. It was soft at first, then grew steadily warm and genuine. The audience rose to their feet, acknowledging not just her technical skill, but the feeling she had poured into the music. She rose from the piano, her cheeks tinged with a light blush, offering a small bow. She did not seek attention, but the recognition filled her with quiet joy. After the performance, several people approached her. Some wanted to know more about her background. Others simply thanked her for sharing such beautiful music. She listened patiently, offering polite and sincere responses. Her humility and authenticity shone through, making the interactions as meaningful as the performance itself. She realized that the connection she had established with the audience was deeper than applause. It was an exchange of emotion and understanding. Later that evening, as she packed up her belongings, the event organizer approached her. "Your performance was incredible," they said. "People are talking about it, and we would love to have you at more events. There is a growing audience eager to hear your music." She nodded quietly, grateful, but not overwhelmed by the attention. To her, the true reward was in sharing her passion and touching lives through her music, not in public recognition or fame. On her way home, she walked through quiet streets, the cool air brushing against her face. She thought about how far she had come, from a timid, overlooked musician to someone whose talent was acknowledged and appreciated. It was not the attention that mattered most, but the affirmation that her dedication and love for music could create meaningful experiences for others. The next few weeks were filled with a balance of practice, reflection, and small performances. She continued to refine her skills, exploring new pieces and experimenting with expression. Each practice session was a chance to learn, to grow, and to deepen her understanding of music. She faced challenges along the way, moments of doubt, and times when progress felt slow. Yet, each difficulty became a stepping stone, a lesson that strengthened her resolve. During this period, she also began mentoring a few young musicians who had approached her for guidance. They were eager, talented, but uncertain of their own abilities. She shared her experiences, emphasizing the importance of patience, persistence, and humility. She encouraged them to focus on the music itself, rather than seeking validation from others. Watching them grow, slowly gaining confidence and skill, brought her a sense of fulfillment that rivaled any applause. One day, she received another letter from the Maestro. He had been following her progress and invited her to perform at a larger recital, alongside other skilled musicians. She opened the envelope with care, feeling a mixture of excitement and calm determination. This was another step, another opportunity to grow and connect through music. She accepted, not out of ambition, but because she felt ready to share her art on a larger stage. In preparation, she dedicated herself to practice with renewed focus. Each day, she played for hours, refining technique, exploring emotion, and experimenting with new interpretations. She approached each piece thoughtfully, considering not only how it sounded, but how it would make the audience feel. Her connection with the piano deepened, and the music became an even more natural extension of her emotions and experiences. The day of the larger recital arrived. The hall was grand, filled with a more diverse audience. She felt the familiar flutter of nerves, but also a quiet confidence that came from knowing she had prepared and practiced diligently. As she took her place at the piano, she allowed herself a brief moment to breathe and center her thoughts. The lights, the audience, and the grandeur of the hall did not intimidate her. She had learned that the power of music lay in expression, not in appearances. As she played, the hall seemed to respond to her music. Each note carried emotion, each phrase told a story. The audience listened intently, captivated by the authenticity and depth of her performance. Some were moved to tears, others smiled softly, and many leaned forward, completely absorbed in the experience. She played not for applause, but to connect, to convey the feelings that words could not capture. When the final note faded, the silence was profound, followed by a rising tide of applause. The audience was genuinely moved, and the recognition was heartfelt. She stood, offering a modest bow, her heart full of gratitude and quiet pride. She knew that the journey was ongoing, that there would always be more to learn, more to express, and more connections to make through her music. After the recital, she returned backstage, where the maestro greeted her warmly. "Your performance was extraordinary," he said. "You have grown so much, and your music touches hearts in a way that few can achieve." She smiled softly, appreciating his words but remaining humble. She knew that growth and connection were her true goals, and recognition was merely a reflection of the impact of her dedication and passion. That evening, as she walked home under the soft glow of streetlights, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the days when she had been overlooked, the doubts she had faced, and the quiet determination that had carried her forward. Each challenge, each moment of hesitation, had shaped her into the musician she had become. She realized that the true reward was not the applause or recognition, but the ability to express herself, to touch lives, and to continue growing in her art. She returned to her piano at home, playing for herself in the quiet of the night. The music filled the room, a celebration of her journey, her perseverance, and the connections she had made through her melodies. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had remained true to herself, her passion, and her love for music. The journey was far from over, but she felt ready, confident, and inspired to continue sharing her gift with the world. The following weeks were a blend of preparation, reflection, and small performances that continued to shape her journey. She woke up early each day, greeted by the soft light of morning, and began her routine of practice. The piano was more than an instrument. It was a companion, a friend that allowed her to pour her emotions freely and without judgment. She explored new compositions, experimented with emotion, and refined her technique, knowing that every hour spent in practice was a step forward. Word of her growing talent continued to spread. Invitations arrived for intimate gatherings, cultural events, and even small concerts. Each opportunity was carefully considered. She did not seek fame, but she understood the value of sharing her gift. Every performance was a chance to touch hearts, to connect through music, and to show that humility and dedication could create beauty beyond appearances. One afternoon, she received a personal note from the maestro. He had watched her progress and wanted her to join a special event with several accomplished musicians. The event was an opportunity for her to perform alongside experienced artists and to be seen by a larger audience. She read the note carefully, feeling a mixture of excitement and calm determination. It was another step forward, a challenge she was ready to embrace. On the day of the event, she arrived early, carrying only her music sheets and a quiet sense of focus. The venue was elegant, yet inviting, with soft lighting and a warm atmosphere. People gathered, chatting and finding their seats, while staff prepared the stage. She observed the scene quietly, taking in the details without distraction. She did not need to be the center of attention. Her music would speak for her. Backstage, other musicians were preparing, tuning instruments, and rehearsing final pieces. Many were accomplished and confident, their presence commanding attention. She did not feel intimidated. She had learned that true confidence came from preparation, dedication, and the willingness to remain authentic. She adjusted her piano bench, positioned her hands, and allowed herself a moment to breathe. The nerves were there, but they were now familiar companions, reminders that she cared deeply about her craft. When it was her turn, she walked onto the stage quietly. The audience welcomed her with polite applause, but she paid little attention, focusing instead on the piano before her. As she placed her fingers on the keys, a calm determination settled over her. She began with a soft introduction, letting the melody unfold naturally. Each note carried emotion, telling a story without words, drawing listeners into the journey she created. The music grew in depth and complexity, capturing the audience's attention. Some leaned forward, captivated by the nuances and the emotional resonance. Others closed their eyes, allowing the sound to fill their hearts. The maestro, seated nearby, watched intently, his expression reflecting admiration and quiet surprise. Even the other musicians paused, appreciating the skill and authenticity she brought to the performance. She played with both precision and passion, blending technical mastery with expressive nuance. Each chord resonated with honesty, each phrase carried intention. The room seemed to breathe with her, the music creating a shared experience that transcended words. She was fully immersed, unaware of the time or audience, completely absorbed in the dialogue between herself and the piano. As she reached the final section of her piece, the melody swelled with emotion, yet remained controlled and deliberate. Every note was a reflection of her journey, the challenges faced, the moments of doubt, and the quiet determination that had carried her forward. The audience was captivated, sensing the depth and sincerity behind each movement. The hall felt alive with the music, a collective experience of emotion and connection. When the last note faded, there was a brief, reverent silence. Then the applause began, growing steadily into a warm, enthusiastic ovation. The audience rose to their feet, acknowledging not just her technical skill, but the honesty and depth of her performance. She rose from the piano, offering a modest bow, her face calm yet radiating quiet satisfaction. The recognition was genuine, heartfelt, and yet she remained grounded, knowing that her true purpose was to share music, not to chase applause. Backstage, the other musicians approached her with admiration and curiosity. Some asked questions about her technique. Others expressed sincere appreciation for the emotion she had conveyed. She responded politely, sharing insights from her practice and experiences without arrogance. Her humility, combined with her evident talent, made a lasting impression on everyone she met. She realized that respect earned through authenticity and dedication was far more meaningful than attention gained through appearance or showmanship. After the event, she walked home slowly, reflecting on the evening. She thought about the people she had touched with her music, the connections she had made, and the continued growth she experienced as a musician. Being overlooked in the past had taught her patience and humility, shaping her into the person she had become. She understood that each performance, each note played, was an opportunity to communicate something meaningful, to leave a lasting impression, and to continue her journey with integrity. In the days that followed, she continued her practice routine, exploring new pieces and refining her expression. She welcomed each challenge, each moment of doubt, as an opportunity to learn and grow. Her dedication remained steady, unaffected by recognition or applause. She understood that the true essence of music was in the process, in the dedication to craft, and in the ability to convey emotion and connect with others. She also began mentoring more young musicians who sought her guidance. She encouraged them to focus on their own growth, to embrace humility, and to practice with dedication and passion. She shared her story of being overlooked, of the quiet perseverance that had led her to recognition, and the importance of remaining true to oneself. Her guidance was practical yet heartfelt, inspiring her students to approach music with patience, discipline, and authenticity. One evening, after a long practice session, she sat quietly by the piano, reflecting on her journey. She thought about the moments of doubt, the times she had been overlooked, and the small victories that had shaped her path. She felt gratitude for every experience, understanding that each had contributed to her growth and her ability to connect with others through music. The piano, the instrument she had cherished for so long, had been both a teacher and a companion, guiding her through the challenges and triumphs. As she played a simple melody, letting the music flow naturally, she realized that her journey was far from over. There were still many pieces to explore, many performances to give, and many hearts to touch. Recognition and applause were valuable, but they were secondary to the true joy of creating and sharing music. She understood that her role as a musician was to remain authentic, dedicated, and passionate, allowing her art to speak for itself. In the quiet of the night, she reflected on the lessons she had learned. That humility and perseverance could overcome initial doubts and obstacles. That true connection came from sincerity and emotional depth, and that dedication to craft was the foundation of lasting impact. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had stayed true to herself and her love for music. Each day, each note, and each performance was a continuation of the journey she had begun so long ago, a journey defined by passion, dedication, and the quiet strength of a modest woman who had refused to be overlooked. The day of the grand recital had arrived, a culmination of months of preparation, practice, and quiet growth. The hall was magnificent, filled with an eager audience that included music lovers, critics, and students alike. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, and the hum of conversation and movement created a background of excitement that made her pulse quicken. Yet, amid the grandeur and noise, she felt a calm centeredness. She had faced challenges before, overcome doubts, and grown into her music. Today, she was ready to share her heart through the piano. Backstage, she adjusted the piano bench and took a deep breath. Her fingers hovered above the keys, feeling the familiar surface beneath her touch. The room was busy with other performers, each preparing in their own way, but she remained focused on the task at hand. She did not need to impress anyone. Her goal was simply to play with honesty and passion. The maestro, who had been a guiding presence throughout her journey, gave her a nod of encouragement. His eyes reflected respect and anticipation, a silent acknowledgement of the effort and growth she had shown. As she stepped onto the stage, the audience shifted slightly, sensing the presence of someone whose reputation had quietly grown through previous performances. She greeted them with a modest nod and sat down at the piano. The lights cast a warm glow over the keys, and the silence of the hall seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her to begin. She allowed herself a brief moment to close her eyes and connect with the music that had been a constant companion through every step of her journey. The first notes were soft, delicate, almost hesitant, but they quickly gained confidence and strength. Her fingers moved with grace and precision, guided by years of practice and an intimate understanding of the instrument. Each note carried emotion, each phrase told a story. The audience listened intently, drawn in by the depth and sincerity of her playing. Some leaned forward, captivated, while others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. The hall seemed to vibrate with the resonance of her melodies. As she played, memories of her journey surfaced. Long nights of practice, moments of doubt, and times when she had been overlooked. Each memory became part of the music, shaping the dynamics, the pauses, and the expression. She felt a deep connection to the piano, as if it were an extension of her own voice. The music was no longer just a series of notes. It was a living expression of her soul. The audience responded in subtle ways. Some whispered in awe, others smiled softly, and a few were moved to tears. Even the other musicians present paused in admiration, recognizing the extraordinary blend of skill and emotion. The maestro watched closely, his expression shifting from attentive observation to visible admiration. She had become a musician who commanded attention not through showiness, but through authenticity and depth. Her fingers moved across the keys, creating melodies that were both intricate and flowing. Each piece she played told a different story, of hope, struggle, perseverance, and quiet joy. The audience felt the emotion, understanding without words the journey she had taken to arrive at this moment. Every pause, every crescendo, every gentle touch of the keys was deliberate, carrying meaning beyond the notes themselves. When she reached the climax of her performance, the hall seemed to hold its breath. The music soared, filling every corner of the room, wrapping around the listeners and drawing them into a shared experience. She felt a profound connection with everyone present, a silent dialogue between her heart and theirs. In that moment, she realized that her journey, from being overlooked to standing here with confidence, had prepared her to express the depth of emotion in a way that no recognition alone could achieve. As the final notes faded, a profound silence followed, the kind that occurs when a performance touches something deep within the audience. Then, slowly, the applause began. It started softly, then grew steadily, filling the hall with warmth and appreciation. The audience rose to their feet, acknowledging not just her technical skill, but the emotion, sincerity, and depth she had conveyed. She rose from the piano, offering a humble bow, her cheeks tinged with a light blush. She felt gratitude for the recognition but remained centered, knowing that the true reward was in the music itself. After the performance, the maestro approached her, his expression full of admiration. "Your playing was extraordinary," he said. "You have grown so much, and your music touches hearts in a way that few can achieve." She smiled softly, appreciating his words while remaining modest. She understood that growth, connection, and authenticity were more important than any accolades. This performance was a reflection of her journey, her dedication, and her love for music. In the following days, invitations continued to arrive. She was asked to perform at various events, from cultural gatherings to private recitals. Each opportunity was considered carefully, and she accepted those that resonated with her. She remained committed to her principles, playing with honesty, connecting with her audience, and continuing to grow as a musician. Her life was now intertwined with music in ways that went beyond recognition. It was a calling, a passion, and a source of joy. She continued to mentor young musicians, sharing her experiences and insights. She taught them that talent alone was not enough, that humility, patience, and perseverance were equally important. She encouraged them to focus on the music, to practice diligently, and to remain true to themselves. Through her guidance, she inspired others to embrace their own journeys, to find confidence in quiet dedication, and to understand that being overlooked at first did not define their worth. One evening, as she sat quietly at her piano, reflecting on the years that had brought her here, she realized how far she had come. From a modest, overlooked musician to someone recognized for depth, emotion, and authenticity, her journey had been one of growth, resilience, and quiet strength. She understood that each challenge, each doubt, and each moment of persistence had shaped her into the musician she had become. She played softly for herself, letting the music flow naturally, filling the room with a gentle melody. The notes carried memories, emotions, and experiences, a private celebration of her journey. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had remained true to her passion, her principles, and her own voice. Music had become more than a skill. It was a way of living, a means of expression, and a bridge to connect with others in profound ways. As the night deepened, she reflected on the lessons she had learned. That humility and perseverance could overcome initial doubts, that authenticity and emotional depth were more powerful than mere recognition, and that dedication to one's craft was the foundation of lasting impact. She understood that being overlooked was never a reflection of worth, but an opportunity to grow, to refine, and to prepare for the moment when one's talent could truly shine. Her journey continued, filled with new opportunities, challenges, and discoveries. She remained committed to her music, to the joy of creating, and to the connections she could forge through her melodies. Recognition and applause were affirming, but they were not the goal. The true reward lay in the music itself, in the authenticity of expression, and in the impact she could make on others' hearts and minds. In the quiet of the night, she closed her eyes and let the final notes linger in her mind. She thought about the audience, the maestro, the young musicians she had guided, and all those who had been touched by her music. She realized that her story was not just about talent, recognition, or performances. It was about perseverance, authenticity, and the courage to share one's passion with the world. And with that understanding, she knew that her journey as a musician, as a modest woman who had once been overlooked, would continue, filled with music, growth, and the quiet power of heartfelt expression.